Jesus had a real connection with people and a real concern about the everyday anxiety and worries that people lived under and with. It's interesting that he's talking to disciples about worry. You know, you'd expect him to talk about many things, but he talked to them about worry. He's something to say to all of us, including those who live in the isolated parts of our great country, such as came out in that conversation just a few moments ago with Janine, in this country that is so large and yet can be so remote and isolated for people. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 12, verses 22 through to 31. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than the birds? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." Now, there seems to me to be a basic principle that underpins the fact that we should not be filled with worry or anxiety. And it's this, that life is more important than things. And if we live in a world where things become all important, then we're going to be anxious, aren't we? But when things get into perspective and we see the real secret and meaning of life, then things take on a totally different way. Food and clothes represent this. That's why we read it quite directly in verse 23. We read these words, "For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes." Now, I live at the centre of a city, and I'd be forgiven for thinking that as I walk up a city street, that life is all about buying things, about clothes, and about so much extravagance. Jesus says it's not. He talks also about the fruitlessness of worry. Verse 25 exposes that thought when we read this. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? You can't do anything about it. If you worry, are you going to make life that bit longer? No. If you worry, you're going to make it shorter. Well, there's a chance you will through ill health. So why worry? And the reality of all this is made clear in the verse that follows verse 25, in verse 26. Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? If you can't make life longer by worrying, why worry about anything? Why do we allow the collection of things we call our lives to combine in such a way that they have a dominant hold upon us? It would be so easy, wouldn't it, for people who live in remote places in this wonderful Australia to worry about when is it next going to rain? Well, that can't be determined by them. And if they can get that in perspective, surely it leaves those of us that live in cities with so much around us to put in perspective the things that we should be concerned about. One lovely writer, Joanna Weaver, wrote a book entitled Having a Merry Heart in a Martha World. Of course, using that wonderful passage in Luke as the starting point. She concluded in a very poignant way. Concern draws us to God. Worry pulls us from him. That thought is a very real one, isn't it? That worry is something that might drive us away from God, not bring us close. Might make us feel so anxious that we become dominated, turned in, insular in the way that we look at life. We must make the positive choice of trust in life. For that becomes the positive antidote to anxiety. We need something that is it speaks against. I enjoyed our guests today, but I've enjoyed so many guests that I've had on this program. I recall interviewing George Verwer. Now, George Verwer founded Operation Mobilization, and they had their wonderful ships that went around the world, and they were involved in helping people in so many places. He wrote a devotional piece which declared this: I do not believe in worry because I believe in God's place of rest. I love that thought. The reason why we don't worry is that God has given us a new vision, a new purpose, and a new rest. Rest is one of those wonderful truths of the Old Testament. God brought the people who were under his guidance to a place of rest. And we find rest in Jesus Christ. And I would be saying, of all the things that we can pastorally do to help people whose lives are filled with anxiety, is to say to them, there is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God. May we know what it is to put our trust and hope in him, and not find ourselves filled with worry, filled with anxiety, and crushed by those things, but brought close through the peace and love of God.